Since you guys seem to like gear videos, I know I've mentioned in a previous video where I'd like to try and focus my way away from just gear, but the gear videos seem to do the best. So since you guys like gear videos, we're going to do a gear video, sort of. More maybe on the philosophical side or whatever. But we're going to talk about PRS guitars today. I know. I had a video where I said stop focusing on gear, focus on the playing, and that gear acquisition is gets in the way of growing and learning as a player, and that I was going to focus on that too. But let's be honest, you can't really avoid the gear all the time. This is actually a video I wanted to do for a while, or maybe not like specifically this video, because I am just winging it. We're flying by the seat of our pants here. I'm going to be all over the place. There's no script. But this isn't, I'm not a YouTuber. This isn't the YouTube like channel type thing. It's more just a hangout. I give you what I think or what I know, or, my opinions or experiences and stuff. And maybe you learn stuff. Maybe you agree with stuff. Maybe you disagree with stuff, whatever. I wanted to talk about PRS for a while because it's a brand that I grew to really love over time. And maybe not for the ways that you might think. I do have two PRSs here, so it'll be kind of like the banging on a couple 335s, the Epiphone versus Gibson thing. And so this will be kind of like that, but PRS. I don't have an SE, but I do have an S2 and a core. They're not the newest, latest models or anything like that, but I do think that the PRS spirit and passion and went into these guitars like they have been since he started until like the latest models that they're pumping out. But I've wanted to do this video for a while. It's no secret I'm a Gibson guy. Anybody who's been following this channel at all knows that Gibson's kind of my thing. And I would never, at least not yet, I haven't found one, but I've tried to make a PRS like my number one go-to. This is my guitar, and I'll explain that a little bit later. But I pick up a Les Paul and I'm at home, and it feels right for me, for my own preferences and feel and whatever, right? Kind of like the Gibsons with their, the QCs all over the map. They're not as consistent. So you got to find one that resonates for you, and it's an older design. And to me, that's like, flawed, broken guitar to me that requires you to fight it a little more. Just seems to fit me better, probably because I'm a flawed, broken human being. So I don't know. Whereas the PRS ones are like, they're perfect out of the gate every time. Like the QC is so consistent across the range, from the SE import line all the way up to private stock and wood library and all that and everything in between. So I kind of want to just go over the things about PRS that I love, things about PRS that I like, and the things about PRS that I don't really care for. And we're going to go through that. We're going to do some sound comparisons of these two guitars that I have here. So I've got my Core SC245. This is a 2007. And we have over here a 2018 S2 single cut. I've owned another Core of the SC250, which I've sold. It was a green one. If you go to the RomainPickups.com site and you go to the 5 Series line of pickups, that green guitar, that's that other Core I'm talking about. And I've owned an SE, so I've worked on a fair number of PRS from import all the way up to higher up in the Core line to compare. So with these, we'll compare them acoustically, because there's a big thing with that. And we'll plug them into an amp, probably the Bogner over here, and mic that up and just kind of compare the two. I mean, it's not the fairest of comparisons because the S2 has the number 7S pickups, which is their import version of the number 7 pickups. And this blue one had the number 7 pickups when I got it. It doesn't have those anymore. Those were dark, and we'll get into that. But to start off, I'll just kind of talk about why, like, what is it about the company that I really love, and so we'll get into that. So, what is it that I love about PRS? It's not the guitars. It's the guy himself, and it's the company that he's built and the team that he's built that I absolutely love. I think that you think back, like, Orville Gibson. I don't even think he saw an electric guitar, let alone a solid body electric guitar. He died long before things got electrified, I think, guitar wise. And if I'm wrong, correct me, whatever. But he didn't see the Les Pauls and the AS 335s and all that. Orville Gibson was gone before Gibson became the Gibson that we all know and love, or some of you might hate. Right, and then you get Ted McCarty, who was at Gibson, during those early to mid to late 50s era, but that's in charge of all the guitars that these ones are trying to mimic, right? He was there. He helped with a lot of the design and refinements. And then he later worked with Paul Reed Smith himself on some stuff. And I'm sure Paul had a lot of awesome conversations, learned a lot from Ted that way. And then you look at the other side, you got Fender, right? And you got Leo Fender didn't play guitar at all. He couldn't play. He might have been like tone deaf. I don't know if he even had pitch or anything, but he had an electronics. He built all the amps and stuff, and he was able to design amps that are pretty much the ones that everybody wants today. They haven't changed much. You look at Marshalls. What Marshalls do people want today? All the original old stuff, really. Right? And so, but he sold the company in the mid 60s and moved on, and he did, he worked with the Ernie Ball Music Man for a while, and then in the G&L, and then he died, and he's been gone for a long time. So he hasn't been around in the guitar industry for a very long time, and he didn't play. Then came this skinny, tall, curly-haired dude with round glasses in the early 80s, repairing guitars and making his own between repairs, and decide to take the the Les Paul Junior or Les Paul Special design and refine it and make it the way that he would want to see it made. And that's where he carved his own design of what PRS would eventually become. And you look at him today, he's still alive. He's still every bit as passionate about guitars, whether it be guitar making, guitar tones, guitar sound, guitar design, guitar innovation, playing guitar. So he's still every bit, arguably probably even more passionate now than he was back then, because it's built over time. And he also plays. He's got his band that he plays in around the Maryland area and stuff. So he can play. He still plays. He's still every bit as passionate about everything guitar, even more so probably. And he's built this company that's some might argue it's more than a team, more like a family. And I'm sure there's some people that work there or have worked there that hated the job. There is no single job that is for everybody across the board. But from what I see through videos and stuff like that, it sounds like there are a lot worse places to be working. like in the pandemic, and probably large in part thanks to the SE line, uh, when you had to send the workers home, and he was able to continue paying their salaries. I remember hearing that at some point, and to make sure that don't worry about your bills, you can still pay your bills, and we'll get back to making guitars as soon as we can, kind of thing. And there's a lot of places where they would just lay off people, and fend for yourselves until we call you back. And so I get the sense they didn't roll that way, and they made things work so that they can keep everyone employed and everyone paid, even if they weren't, you know, in the factory for whatever rule reason the government in that area called. Like we were locked down for way too long. But anyways, that aside, it seems like he cares, and the team that he's built seem like they care, and you see it in the guitars because they're from the SE all the way up to the core line and beyond. You can tell that there's a lot of attention to detail, a lot of care, and when someone puts a lot of their passion and heart, and or even simply just good work ethic into their job, you can see and feel that difference. So with that's why I love PRS as a brand. It's the man who started it, and his, we share a lot. It's funny because we share this similar nerdy things. Like there was one video where he's taking different pieces of hardware and dropping it on the table to, like, like a nut, right? And comparing the different ping notes and stuff like that of nuts and of bridges, and just hearing the different ping, and then taking pieces of wood and knocking and saying, hey, there's a musical note there. And it's funny because I've been doing the drop test. If I'm replacing a nut on a guitar, I'll buy a couple nut blanks, and I'll drop each one and I'll use the one that pings the most. And I thought I was just neurotic that way, but turns out that there's a guy named Paul who makes guitars up in Maryland who does the same thing. So we share a similar, like I've done that with, like, the bridge studs on Les Pauls, on these guys, and you hear for the ping, you compare different materials. Let's try these posts and then those posts. Thumb wheels, like on the Tune-o-matic bridges, the studs, like the posts, the threaded posts, all that stuff. So I feel like I share a lot of similar views or approaches to this whole guitar thing. But like they have, and the team that he's assembled is just, I mean, like you got the people who are in charge of doing the stain tops, and then the ones who are in charge of coming up with new stain combinations. Like they'll do there's one, I forget what it's called. They have different names for their, but it's kind of a burst, but it's like orangey black, but it shines a bit brownish purple. And the way they do that, they'll I've seen it done on their Instagram. They stain it like purple, and you're like, whoa, it's gonna be a nice purple guitar. And then they sand that off, and then they put like an amber color on that, and all of a sudden the purple looks black. And then they layer different colors, and then in the end, it's almost like you would have never guessed the end color is where they were going with the colors. And I've seen like pink and stuff. I think that's what it was. There was purple and some pink. They sand that, and then they put the amber over top, and it just gets this like this honey golden kind of color with like dark edges and flame. So the people that are working in the stain department, they just keep coming up with stuff. And arguably, I think PRS are the masters with the stain tops. I can't think of any other brand that really does it quite as good. You could argue Nags, but I mean, he comes from PRS, so that makes sense. And then there's Kiesel. Well, I mean, PRS is doing a lot of videos showing how they're doing this stuff, so it's not a far stretch to think that the dude over at Kiesel said, "Hey, let's borrow this idea and put that in our guitars. But for me, the stained tops that have like the blues and the greens and the purples and all those odd colors that aren't like the trying to mimic the old faded vintage Gibson stuff, PRS has it beat. The other thing, and maybe if there's someone from PRS watching this, which I doubt, but if there is, can you do me a favor? Whoever designed these pickup mounting rings, where you slightly round over, just ever so slightly, and countersink the pickup mounting screws, height adjuster screws, whatever you want to call these, so that it's all flush. Whoever came up with that design, that idea over at PRS, if it's not you who's watching that came up with it, if you know the person, give them a hug for me. Seriously. These little things, like, they don't make an effect on sound or tone, or it's purely aesthetic, but this is another thing that I love about PRS is, so you look at Gibson and Fender, they're very tied down by their heritage, their history, right? So whenever they come up with a new model that might change things up or innovate, majority of the people are like, don't do that. We want the old ones, but new. Keep making the old ones. So they try new models, and they don't really do as good as the models that kind of look like the old ones. They go back to making just the old style, and then people bitch and complain that, hey, how come you're not innovating, blah, blah, blah. So they're always constantly battling between having to stick to the tried and true old vintage spec and trying to throw out some models that push the envelope, that innovate, that do things, right? Fender's got that problem. Gibson's got that problem too, you know. Every time they've done like a Les Paul Modern, and it had like an asymmetrical, slim taper, thin neck, and a heel contour, and all this other, people start, you know, some people love them, but the majority kind of say, what the hell are you doing? Go back to the old stuff. So then they go back to the old stuff, and all you offer is 50s and 60s models. Because PRS started out right from the get-go pretty much making guitars, and let's see how we can improve and innovate on what we're basing our model on and go from there. And they, because of that, they don't seem to be tied down to any heritage or history or original spec, because they've always changed it up and innovated and all that. Like these pickup rings, right? It's like, why did it take so long for anyone to come up with the idea of, hey, let's improve the mounting pickup ring, right? Like, these guys, they're still like, why reinvent the wheel? And that's what I like about PRS is like, well, why not reinvent the wheel? Why can't we refine it? It still feels and looks totally traditional like the old ones, but you get these guitars with these on it, and they feel really, really nice. So this guitar came with the old style ones, right? This is an 07, so that predates this redesign. But once I saw these, I had on another guitar on a video, I had to get them. So I got them for this one. And that's where it's like, yeah, that's really nice. Like, for example, on the Les Paul, especially like, so for example, this is like, you know, that kind of stuff. This guitar is modeled after a 59, measurement down to like, you know, totally modeled after an actual 59. So the neck angle and everything. So all the flaws and all the benefits of the original 59 this one is modeled after is found in that guitar as well. Has a very low neck, a low bridge. I probably, because that particular guitar had more of a, like, less of a neck angle. And what that means is then that the pickups are mounted flush with the tops of the pickup rings on this guy. And what that means is when you're playing and you're palming, that pickup mounting screw kind of digs into your hand. And it doesn't hurt, and it's not awful, and it's not going to, doesn't make the guitar a shitty guitar. But when you go to something like this, where you don't feel that screw, it's just a nice extra touch. So they innovate, right? They had like the wraparound bridge that was non-adjustable, but they played with the material in that, and then they went to this design here. So this one originally had the aluminum bridge, and I ended up buying this one after, just to be able to change different string gauges and change intonation. And also, I want to see if this would end up making the guitar overly, like, inherently brighter, because bridges and posts and stuff can change the sound of a guitar slightly, but it's there. And it did help a little bit, but I always felt that this guitar here always sounded best with fresh strings. And as soon as you played on it for an hour, it would just sound warm and dull. And what I found out is it seems to kind of be a bit of a PRS thing. They just sound acoustically warmer, and that translates into through the pickups. But they've never, like, they used to use speed knobs, and now they use these knobs, right? The lampshades, they call them. All kinds of stuff. The nut, like, they're constantly changing. So you look at this, so the single cut, right? 245. So that's a 24.5-inch scale length. The SC 250 is a 25-inch scale length. If you look at the single cuts that they make now, the 594s, and that means 24.594 inch scale length. Why 0.594? Well, this is another thing that where Paul and the team can play around here, is they have the freedom of going different routes and innovating, or they can go with the traditional, chase the vintage stuff, but they can also do the modern stuff, and they're not as affected, or not affected at all, compared to Fender and Gibson. But the 0.594, Paul was looking at real 50s Les Pauls. He had a 57 Les Paul, gold top, and I'm sure he's measured and, like, seen and measured and inspected pile of others. And what he found was that even though, Les Pauls are marketed as 24.75-inch scale length, so 24.75, some of them were 24 point, like the old ones, like 24.5 to upwards to just under 24.75. And he found from the ones that, I forget where I read it or saw it on a video, but something to the effect of the sample size that he had. It's like the middle of the road was about 24.594, and that's how he landed on that number. And if I measure this guy, it's 24 point, I think 62 something. And these, like the actual Gibsons, I think these ones measure out to like 24.695. So they're not exactly 24.75. So he started playing with scale lengths too, right? So this one here is a 24.5. The S2 we have here is a 25. I haven't played a 594 yet, but I would imagine it sounds a lot like the 24.5. The 25-inch one, this is where I really started to notice that scale length affects the tone, is you can get, especially depending on the pickups. The pickups that are in the S2 right now, not so much. They're overwound, they're very warm and compressed sounding, so it doesn't really get there. But with a brighter, more open sounding pickup on a 25-inch scale length guitar, like I had on my green one. My green one was, here, put a picture here, the green one. That one, 25-inch scale length with my pickups in it. It had the 557s in it last, and before that was the 558s that are in this blue one now. But it was bright, and it had a Fender snap to it, even in the humbucker mode. You'd split it and it would thin out a bit, but in full humbucker mode, especially the neck position, it sounded very Strat-like. And that's all due to the scale length. So that's what makes me love PRS, is the passion behind the brand, and behind the man who's still alive, who still plays, and he's still there. And the team he's assembled, and all of that, and the fact that they can innovate and change and try new things, to me is is freeing, right? The whole basis behind my 5 series pickups. I'll have a link for the 5 series down in the description if you're even interested. If you are, cool. If not, that's cool. But the whole 5 series was I was making 59ers, the PAF, my PAF replica, right, and the Les Pauls and stuff. But with those, you can't really experiment much. You got to have the right bobbins, the right pole spacing, the right coil wire. You got to have magnets that fit the right tonality. You know, if you use 4 conductor wires on them, it does change the tone a little bit. It does affect some things a little bit. So I tend to prefer like the 59ers that I make, the PFs that I make, come with single conductor braided. If you have to have one 4 conductor, I can do a custom build PF 59er with 4 conductor, but I think I'm gonna come up with a spec for a model that if you want a PAF with 4 conductor, you go to this new pickup. I'll work on that, and I'm not gonna shove that down your throat right now. But that whole line of the 5 slash, so the 557, 558, 585, and 595. I even had a 506 and a 508 at one point, which they're more or less discontinued at this point. I had a 593, which became the 595. So I'm always refining. That line of pickups allows me to change different things, and it doesn't become not the thing, right? If you're doing a replica PAF, you got to make it like as close to the real deal as you humanly can with the right materials and the right, the right spirit behind it. And you get great results. But as soon as you deviate from that, like if you use ABS bobbins, well, the space inside the bobbin where the coil wire goes has slightly different dimensions, which changes the size and shape of the coil, which affects the tone, which is why you can't get a true PAF tone out of a 50 millimeter spaced bobbin, or 52 or 53. So by going to the 5 line, by designing or coming up with that whole line, now I was free to try and refine. And if a model didn't quite, if I thought of a better way to make a model, then I can improve it and keep refining that way. And I'm never deviating from what it is, because what it is always follows it. Whereas with the 59ers, I can't deviate, because then it deviates from what it is or what it's supposed to be. So that line of pickups was inspired by PRS Guitars, because that whole thing, you're not tied down by a certain heritage or whatever. So I don't know. I think that's enough talking. I hope I hit all the points I meant to talk about. See, I'm having coffee and dropping the kids off at school, and I'm thinking, okay, I'll talk about this, I'll cover that. I think I've covered pretty much everything. Yeah, they innovate, they constantly try to refine and change, and they're fluid. I didn't talk about the things I don't like. One thing I don't like is that, and this will make me sound dumb, but I'm going to say it anyways. You can pick anyone off the wall, brand new, and they're all going to be pretty awesome. I tend to like ones where you have to try 10, 15, and you get dogs, you get some that are and then you'll find one that's like, okay, whoa, I like the hunt. I'm sick like that. I like to dig and find my one. And the problem with these is they're all so consistent that none of them stand out, because none of them suck. If that makes sense. Oh yeah, there's something else I'm going to talk about. But yeah, that's one thing I don't like, because I guess I like the mystery and the search and the hunt. The other thing that's, especially if you're like buying and selling gear, right? So I'm constantly moving stuff to get new things. If you want that new thing, you got to sell that old thing to get the new thing, right? Otherwise, you're spending savings or actual money that you're supposed to go to bills and stuff. So you sell gear to buy gear. So it's a self-sustaining ecosystem, basically. And I find with the PRS, the resale is more of a roller coaster because they make a change. So, like for example, the Singlecuts were popular, and then they discontinued those when they went to the McCartys and the 594 type stuff. But I think before that was just the McCartys, and then they went to the Singlecut McCarty, something like that. Regardless, when they discontinue one line because they've improved it and turned it into this other line, sometimes the value of these, because they're less in demand, they drop, and eventually they creep back up. But they're doing this a lot more, whereas Fenders and Gibsons tend to more or less stay consistent, and value, depending on economy and market demand and stuff, they go up and down, but it's not as drastic as I've seen with PRS. So that's another thing. They're hard to not like, though. They're awesome. I like the fight that I get from a Les Paul. I don't know. Maybe I'm just sick that way. So let's talk about the guitars in question before we compare them, and we'll wrap this up. Don't want to make this too long. We're already in the 20 plus minutes. So this one's a 2007 Core SC 245, not a 10 top. I tend to like the ones that aren't 10 tops because they've got more interesting patterns. They're not consistent throughout, so they don't get the 10 top thing. These have 558s. Those are my pickups. 558s. Alnico 4. Same wire as I use on my PF replicas, the 59ers. Alnico 4 magnets. These are not the rough cast. These are the regular strong Alnico 4s. And it's wired like a normal single cut with the push-pull. I don't think I'm going to compare those with the single coil sounds. That's another thing, but it's pretty much stock except for the pickups. And I've changed the tuners on it to Goto locking tuners because I want to try these just to see if they were any good. Because my other PRS at the time, the green one, had the top locker ones. And the stock tuners on this one were a lot of wobble, and they were loose, and they were starting to give out. They're pretty old. So that's this guitar. The other single cut, same configuration. You volume, tone, push, pull on this. Same bridge, same posts. These are just not nickel plated like the other one. The pickups are stock. They're the number 7S, 25-inch scale length. Stock tuners. They're locking. This guy is actually lighter than the blue one. Trying to think what else I need to point out on this. Mahogany back. I can't see a seam. I've looked, and I've taken a flashlight on the back edge here to try and find the seams. It's a one-piece mahogany body. So let's talk S2 real quick. Some of the best bang for your buck if you want a really good guitar. Get them used though, because right now I just noticed the new 594 McCarty version of this guitar. New is like $3,000, over $3,000 Canadian. That's a little much for what this is, but great guitar if you can find them used for under $2,000. They're really high quality. The new ones, they have the American pickups. These are the import pickups. So SE pickups, same pickups as an SE. The switch is good. Feels like decent quality. 25-inch scale length. One-piece mahogany back, mahogany neck. Two-piece flame maple top. It's a subtle flame. It's not as flamey as like the cores, but one thing I've noticed just playing these two is the bevel cut feels nicer on the arm than the violin cut. The violin carve tends to dig a little more your arm. I don't know what else to really say. I don't want to say too much more because you've probably already tuned out. We're going to test them out acoustically. I'll get a condenser mic here. We're going to compare them acoustically because there's a big difference there. I've talked about in the Epiphone versus Gibson 335 thing that it seems like the import guitars have this inherent brightness and tinniness to the sound that Doesn't make it a bad guitar. It's just personal preference. I find it just, I don't like the way it sounds because I can also feel it. Even though I don't hear it, I can also feel that difference. I am very sensitive in that way. I can feel like finishes, like the SEs and the Epiphones, the thick, hard poly finish doesn't, it feels different than whatever's on here, which might be acrylic and nitro, or just acrylic, I don't know. And this one here, which is polyester with something else. They've played around with that stuff. This finish is it feels a lot like nitro minus the stickiness, like Gibson nitro. And this one feels very similar to that, but there is a flaw where these kind of get milky, and then so they've changed their thing. So I got a condenser mic. We're going to compare them acoustically. I'm going to come up with some kind of stupid riff plugged in through the amp, through the mic. Just show the difference. This one here is kind of in between the SE and the core as far as like the brightness and tinniness. There's less body to the sound in this one, acoustically. Plugged in doesn't matter so much because these pickups are hot and they're wax potted and they sound very compressed in 2D, whereas the other one has a sound a little bit more open, more like a PAF, even though they are wax potted, lightly potted. And that will be that. I don't know. That'll be it, I guess. So I'll hook up the mic and we will compare tones acoustically and plugged in and end it, and we'll see how this video goes. Okay, so we have the 07 Core SC245. We're going acoustic in front of the condenser mic. This is a Behringer C1. It's not an expensive mic, but I think this mic might capture the fullness of the sound more than a SM57, especially mic'd acoustically like this. Is it the best mic in the world? No, but I don't have the 20, 30 grand to buy the best mic in the world. It's probably more expensive than that. This works, this does the job. This is the Core acoustically. Now let's do the S2. Back to the Core real quick. So hopefully you hear the difference that I'm hearing in the room here with this mic and this, and maybe some of the phone mic mixed in. In case not, what I'm hearing here is the S2 sounds a little bit brighter, but not because this one's not as bright, but because this one, there's more lows and low mids and more mid-range coming out of this one versus the S2. There's a couple things that I can sort of think why. My green one that I had, which was also a 25-inch scale length one, did sound a little more scooped and more bright naturally, no matter what pickups I put in, compared to this blue one. And this blue one always had more low end and more mids. And what that tends to do is it sounds fuller. So acoustically, you're hearing more of the wood resonating and causing a body tone to it compared to the S2. The S2 is kind of like in between this and an SE as far as like the brightness, and like the SEs tend to be bright. They have a bright tinniness to them, and They don't have the body of the tone that the chorus seem to have. That being said, this is a small sample size. Putting that against, like, you know, the various PRS guitars I have worked on in the past, these two tend to represent what I've seen pretty commonly, pretty consistently, but everybody has different samples at their disposal when it comes to if they have access to PRS guitars. So your results may vary, but that's what I'm hearing. That's what I've been hearing consistently through the thing. Yeah, this S2 is kind of in between the two, but that's just this one S2 in this particular comparison video. But they both sound pretty good, and they both play like butter. Like you don't need to fight these. So now we're gonna plug it in. I think we might test this mic on the amp as well. See what kind of tones we get that way. Compare the two and conclude and wrap this up. Okay, so we're mic'd up. We got the mic on the Cannabis Rex and the PRS Archon cab, and we're pumping tones out of the Bogner 3534, the Core SC245. We only have the FLint for a little bit of reverb. We'll do clean real quick on both. We'll dirty it up. We'll do all that stuff, and then we'll wrap this up. Here we go. Simple chords. That was bridge, middle. Neck. S2. These are hotter pickups. Going back to bridge here, same thing. Middle. And neck. Let's add some dirt. Back to the core. And the famous Bogner blue channel. We clipped a bit on that one. Let me just tweak this a little bit. That's bridge, middle. And neck. And then we're going to do the S2. Okay, so now we got the S2. I'm going to try and remember what I played on the chord here, but something like something like that. Middle. Whatever. It's just for sound, like tone, whatever. Neck. I forget what I played on the neck. I don't know, man. Did you hear any difference there? There's definitely some difference. The sound acoustically does transfer through the pickups, through the amp. It just does. There's some amount of microphonics that, you know, puts in that acoustic character through the amp too. When they're really high wound and wax potted, less so. You get a more focused, compressed 2D sound, and in some situations like that, that might be exactly what you're looking for. I tend to like the more open sounding PAF style thing where you can play those kinds of guitars, those kinds of pickups in a wider array of genres and musical sounds and tones. Whereas if you have high output pickups or really compressed, focused sounding pickups, those are really good when you're doing the high gain stuff where you really want your sound to cut through and to have a certain attack, versus a more open sounding vintage pickup. It might not have that precision that you're looking for. But if you're writing your own songs, or you're playing in the studio, or you play with various bands, or you're in a cover band that covers a lot of musical eras and genres and all that, you might want something that's a little bit more open, less focused sounding, because then your sound's going to sound good with some songs and not with others. And they're all different ingredients that you add into your guitar to get different jobs done. But what I'm hearing out of these two is this one has a thinner sound. It's a more focused, direct sound. The other one's a little bit more open. The neck pickup on this one tends to stay a bit on the thin side and brighter. It comes out brighter because there's not as much low end filling it out versus the other one. The other one, they react similar to PFs, but not quite, kind of in between. I'm trying to think what else. I don't want to miss anything here. We've done sound samples. I don't feel like doing metal stuff. I don't feel like playing metal today, so I'm not going to do super high gain shit. Yeah, I don't know. I guess that's it. My amp is just going because it's a noisy effects loop in that amp. Hopefully there's some sound difference there that you can kind of go, but in all honesty, you can't go wrong with either of these guitars. I mean, they're even the SEs, they're awesome guitars. You do get more out of the guitars the higher up you go, but I think the best bang for buck for PRS would be one of these, man. An S2. You're getting the build quality. You're getting it's built right there in the States. Especially now that they have the US pickups and stuff. But this one here has the SE pickups. But it's a US bridge. You know, the pots are good quality, so you don't have to update those. The switch is good. You don't have, Like they're gig ready out of the box. So are the SEs. The best thing to do is to play a bunch and see which one sounds best to you. But in most people's experience, when you look at a row of PRSs, they're all going to play and sound and feel very, very much on brand, which is top quality, and the innovation is there. And probably the best thing about owning a PRS is that you're owning a piece of guitar history that is still living and in the making, right? Paul's still alive. He still loves guitars, still loves making guitars, and he plays, and he's in a band. His I don't know to the extent of what that band is, but I know they do a lot of they play whenever the PRS does an event in town or at the factory or whatever. But it's a cool brand to be a part of, even if it's just they don't know who you are, but you bought one of their products. You know, would I choose one of these or a core as my one and only? No, I'd probably pick that. But never say never. You never know. Paul might see this and try to convert me, maybe. I doubt it though. He doesn't need that. But cool brand, cool guy. They get a lot of love and a lot of hate, and I don't see why they hate. They're great guitars. They're just not for everybody. Just like these are not for everybody, and these are not for everybody. And there's a lot of different types of people, and that's why we have a lot of different types of ice cream, different types of guitars. Something for everyone. So hope you enjoyed that. It's not so much about, buying more gear or acquiring more gear, but if you have if you've always wondered about PRS, I mean, they're worth checking out. But they may be for you, they may not be for you. You got to try them and see how you feel, and see how it feels. The guitar's got to feel really good to play, and you got to just really love playing the guitar. And if you don't, or if there's always things bugging you about it, then that's not the guitar for you. Right? That's why I like Gibsons. They're the flaws and the inconsistencies. They give a certain level of individuality between all the different Les Pauls or all the different 335s or all, different SGs. Whereas with PRS, you're getting the spirit, the soul, the everything that encapsulates PRS as a whole entity in every guitar. And some people like that and some people don't. And that's where I'm going to leave it at. And what I might do is I might splice some of the tone examples, like the playing, again at the end, but like back to back, splice it together so you can compare and really get a more accurate A/B. We'll put that at the end of this video. If you're new to this channel, thanks for watching. We're at 71 subscribers now. So let's make it 75, then 100, then 500. But thanks for watching. This is just, I'm not a YouTuber. I'm just a guitar enthusiast, a guitar fan. Like, the guitar's been the constant in my life pretty much since I was born and put in a guitar case watching my dad and uncle playing, and guitar has been me ever since then. So I make pickups, links in the bottom for the 5 series, which we've covered a little bit here. And I do this YouTube just for pastime, to document my life so that my kids can see when I'm gone. And also to bring awareness to my brand. I make pickups, they're awesome. Again, maybe they're not for you, or maybe they are for you. Whatever, there's plenty of different ice cream flavors in the world. So, and as I'm finding out, there's more and more pickup whiners popping up everywhere. They're like Tim Hortons almost. So with that, if you're new, thanks for joining along. Hope you stick around. For those that have been around for either the beginning or somewhere along the way, thanks for coming back. I really do appreciate having an audience and sharing my passion with other people who share the same passion. And see you around the bend.